What is the piece of advice you wish someone had given you as you got into that very high level of management?
Yeah, so I think one of the key differences with the CFO role versus sort of an FD or a controller or an FP&A role is the interaction that you have with the board. And it's kind of like a whole new dynamic that you probably haven't experienced, much before in your career. And I certainly hadn't had, the level of interaction with the board that you suddenly have when you step into the CFO role. And I realized recently, and this was actually through working with my coach, that part of the board's role is to challenge management to really think differently in order to continuously deliver kind of, exceptional results. And I didn't really realize that was part of their role. So I was sort of interpreting some of their questions and some of their probes as, picking holes in what we've done or highlighting things that we haven't done or we haven't thought of. And I would feel, coming out of board meetings when I was earlier on in my CFO career that, I just haven't really, made the grade, because if I had, they wouldn't have had any feedback. Whereas actually I've learned that that's their role. Their role is to continually challenge. So I think, it can feel at the start like an exam that's impossible to pass every time you get in front of the board, because no matter how well you do, their job is to come up with something to keep pushing, the performance of the management team. And so those kind of helpful suggestions that they always, come up with, I think they're not things that we haven't thought of. They're really something to be seen as a growth opportunity for me and for the business. So, we can respectively obviously push back to the board where it's appropriate, but really their role is to help us to keep pushing ourselves. And I wish I'd sort of realised that a bit earlier, because I think it would have made a lot of my board interactions, a lot more productive from my side, and I would have felt a lot better about them when I'd come out of those board meetings.
Earlier, you shared some thoughts with us about executive coaches. I'm wondering if it's something you wish you had done sooner or reached out to sooner. Was it just the right time for you to use an executive coach? What would you tell our listeners?
I definitely wish I'd done it sooner. So I did it when I was kind of tying myself in knots about a challenging kind of dynamic that I had at work. And I allowed myself to be tied in knots for a long time before I reached out to anyone for any help. And, the amount of energy that I expended, mainly in my own free time, worrying about those relationships, could have been avoided and turned into a much more productive time for me had I reached out to the coach earlier. And I think one of the reasons that I didn't is I was really nervous about asking my organisation to pay for the coach, because they are quite expensive. And I was, it's not something I necessarily felt like I could fund myself or,
Right.
fully. And that was so silly, because when I did, they were like, wow, this is great. I'm super impressed that you actually want to invest in yourself, and you're investing in yourself for the benefit of the organisation. And this is very clearly linked to, your performance and your contribution to the organisation. And so, of course, we're going to pay for this for you. And it's a relatively small amount for the organisation versus how much it is for an individual. And so that was actually the barrier to me doing it earlier. And I just, I really shouldn't have seen that as a barrier. And hopefully that would help somebody else listening to think that they're worth it. You're worth it to your organization.
What comes to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
Hey, the most important realization or strategic moment that I've had in my career has been that if something seems too complicated, then it probably is. And I think that this can apply to everything. It can apply to processes, strategy, systems, org structure, decision making, kind of everything. And I think this realization is important because it gave me a lot of confidence. I'd previously feel like if there's something in the business that I'm not quite understanding or something that I'm not getting across, that's my own shortcoming and I need to work harder to understand it. But actually, sometimes it is just too complicated. And I came to this realization when I was working in an extremely kind of high pressure situation. It was a turnaround situation. I'd recently joined the business. There was extremely poor visibility into the finances and cash flow. And I basically had to strip everything back that was being done in finance and go completely back to basics in terms of even looking at bank statements to understand what money is coming in, what money is going out, when's it going out, how much do we actually have in the bank, how many people do we have employed? When are they being paid? What supplier commitments do we have? And I literally had to build a cash flow from the ground up to identify how long we had until we breached covenants and where we could pull levers to kind of avoid that sort of liquidity event. And that situation, that kind of burning platform, had all come about due to poor financial systems, reporting, forecasting, and creating, this huge gap between the expected performance of the business and the reality. So the bottom-up kind of back to basics exercise demonstrated to me that, all of this complexity that the business had in terms of this large ERP system, the multiple layers of people in the finance team, the kind of convoluted way they were reporting results and forecasting, and this kind of web of dashboards and adjustments that were being made to financials that were presented to leadership were all just kind of getting in the way of anybody really understanding the performance and anyone being able to identify and then fix the kind of underlying business problem. When we went back to basics in terms of like money in, money out, it was very easy to identify that there was this deficit in the working capital cycle. There was an overly ambitious front loading of kind of growth investment. And when that growth wasn't coming through quick enough, we were getting very quickly into kind of hot water. So with the simplified approach that I had, we were then able to build this plan around what should the cost base be, based on the actual cash inflows that we're getting today, not based on some kind of lofty growth plan, but based on today, what's our sustainable cost base? How do we take action very, very quickly to get the company onto an even keel? And we were able to prioritize investments that were very closely linked to revenue generation. So we could see that tangible link between, we spend money on this, we'll get more inflows. Or they were very linked to other cost reductions that we can make elsewhere in the business. And that allowed myself and the management team to really see what's going to work to not only stabilize this business, but then grow it into the future. From that, we set 4 really simple strategic initiatives for the business to align around for the next 12 months to just get us to a place of kind of safety and hopefully back to some level of growth. And actually what happened was those 4 initiatives were completely the right ones. They set us off on a profitable growth path. And we went from kind of losing 40 million USD a year to 15 million of profit for the next 12 months, like sort of literally overnight, by just pulling out of the business all of this kind of complexity and additional investment that wasn't delivering kind of any return.
In your observation, looking at the situations that you've walked in, is complexity, it kind of creeps, right? I mean, it's like complexity creep. Organizations over time just adopt too many, whatever it might be, processes or technologies or approaches. How do you look at it? Is it just, and how do you prevent sort of this complexity creep that organizations experience over time?
Yeah, I like to think of it as like, when you wallpaper and you can't be bothered to take the old wallpaper off, so you just put more wallpaper over the top.
Sometimes you got to strip it down to make it.
You've got to strip it down, and that's kind of hard, right? That's kind of a dirty job that no one wants to do.
That's right. Yeah, it's the worst. Yeah.
So that would be my analogy to it. But I think, sometimes you have to make some tough decisions. So sometimes when you get to that next phase of growth where your current, let's take a system as an example, your current system is no longer correct to support your next phase. It's no longer scalable. The tough decision is to kind of pull it out and start again. The easier decision is to kind of add something into it and fill a crack and hope that kind of holds together. But actually it creates a far worse situation, and it creates more complexity and more need for humans. So you're kind of building systems and then you're building more humans into the process because your systems aren't really working. And so that's not scalable at all. And
we'd like to know what your priorities are. We know a few of them already, I think, but what your priorities are as CFO of Medius.
Yeah, so I think my main priority is around reducing complexity that we've already spoken about. So they definitely have the wallpaper on wallpaper in terms of some of the systems and how those have grown up. And it's not surprising at all because they've experienced, truly kind of like wonderful growth. But I'm kind of the benefit of hindsight, I suppose, coming in and now saying like, we need to just reassess where we're at from a organization and system perspective. So we're doing that with our ERP implementation. We're streamlining how we do our reporting to just get all of that back closer to the source of truth and make sure that there's no gaps there. But then also we're very, very focused on really leading the way on AI for our customers, listening to our customers in terms of what's going to be useful for them and building out new ways of working for payments, expense management, and accounts payable. So I'm going to be involved in that, which is super exciting because it's the first time that I am the customer of the software of the company that I work for. And, I can't wait to see what we release over the next 12 months.
Well, Emma Brown, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thank you very much.